Two presentations tonight. We have the Intimate Partner Violence in African American Communities, followed by RCS, and they'll be here in a little while. So first of all, we have Dr. Raheem. He's been here several times with us before, taught in Chicago, teaches at Fresno State. Very long list of things on his resume I'm sure he'll tell you about. So if we could all just welcome Dr. Raheem.
Good evening. Before I start, I want to make sure this works. Me and technology is not the best of friends.
She used another one too last night. She was having problems with it too.
She checked the back off.
No, she did. She did something.
Yeah, check the work off. And batteries and no batteries.
Do you need someone to cue it for you?
Is the clicker not working? No? Okay.
Well, while we get the quick work, let me give you a quick background. Like she said, my name is Dr. Malik Raheem. I arrived here from Chicago in August of 2012. I earned my doctorate in counselor education and supervision from the great Northern Illinois University. Go Huskies. Let me tell you a little bit about myself when I arrived here. I didn't know it gets this, we all adults here, damn hot. You know, when I first arrived here for the interview to get the position in the counselor education and rehabilitation program, the person who was the chair at that time, his name is Dr. Valencia, he was telling me it got hot, right? I don't know if you all ever met anyone that's from Chicago.
I'm from Chicago.
You from Chicago? Okay, well, she could probably attest to this. We're a very, very conceited bunch of people. Right? So it's like, if you ever meet someone from Chicago, the first thing they do is, when you tell them something, first thing they'll say is like, yeah, well, it ain't like Chicago. So like you say, well, we, ain't working.
Yeah, and change batteries. So.
Okay. Well, first thing they'll say is, like, if you say something like, well, it gets cold out here in Fresno. I mean, the thing about it is, I caught the 9 bus when we first arrived here. I didn't have a car, so I was catching the 9 bus, right? And see, in Chicago, we got this very intricate public transportation where you really don't need a car. You get on a train, bus, anywhere, right? Your bus system out here is kind of different. While in Chicago it runs every 5 to 10 minutes, you catch a bus or a train. Out here it runs every other week. But anyway, when he told me it got hot out here, I'm thinking, yeah, Chicago, you got humidity, around the leg, and hot. Of course, you can't show your narcissistic side on the interview, right? So you got to sit there and be quiet. So I'm saying, okay. And the next thing I know, we came out here, and it's 110 degrees. So like on Facebook, I stopped posting the temperature, and I just say 2 degrees below hell. Please. But y'all winters are really nice. Yeah. I don't miss Chicago winters out here today. That around that time I start posting degree temperature. But y'all walk around with these parka coats on and 80 degrees, winter temperature. Talking about it's cold. Let me give you a brief explanation about the presentation I'm going to do right now. My understanding is you all are mental health professionals, and you all work with people who are intimate partner violence, so either victims or perpetrators. So it's like, I'm sure you all gotten the numbers and all the statistics and the psycho-violence and all that stuff, right? So this is going to be a little bit different. What I'm going to do is talk about a little bit of the psychosocial mental health development around the African American community that makes it a little bit prone to certain intimate partner violence and stuff like that. Then I'm going to, at the end, talk about some of the things as mental health professionals you could do if you have an African American client. Okay? So that's how we're going to do it.
Are you holding your mouth too right?
I'm trying to figure out. Hello. Change slides. Okay.
If you want, I can sit over there and I can pick it for you.
It might end up what we're going to do. Okay. Thank you so
I'll
much.
sit over here.
Thank you so much. My lovely assistant.
Let me know.
Okay. One of the biggest issues in the African American community is the myth of the resilient and strong African American woman, right? Is that throughout history that she can withstand just about anything. Well, what I'm about to talk about is that myth, unfortunately, has caused a lot of mental health issues within the African American community. Because a lot of African American women feel that they have to live up to that stereotype, right? African American women are more prone to intimate partner violence compared to other ethnic groups, right? And in this presentation, I'm going to discuss briefly why. But before we get to that, let's talk about a little bit about definition. Domestic violence is violence, whether it's physical, emotional, or psychological, that occurs within the household. So that could be brother against sister, that could be cousins, that could be aunties, right? However, intimate partner violence is specifically about people who are in an intimate relationship, okay? So, for this discussion, I'm going to be using intimate partner violence as examples, okay? One of the issues in the African American community when it comes to intimate partner violence is that, on average, it's not.
Sorry. We're looking for the page number, and we've got a binder, so we didn't know what she was telling her, it's 156. We're trying to stay where we are in our binder.
Follow along
Oh,
with you.
no problem. Let's catch up. Let's catch up. Okay. In the African American community, just like in other communities, it's not solely just male on female, right? It's sometimes female onto the male. But, just like in other communities, while the woman might initiate it, she's also most likely to be injured or killed, okay? So don't be surprised if one of your clients might be a male. But I'm going to discuss why sometimes African American men do not come forward when they are the victims of intimate partner violence. Okay? Give you a brief history. Just in this country, right? From about 1695 to about 1865, 1865, excuse me, African Americans were enslaved. They weren't even considered humans, they were considered property, right? Then, from 1865 to 1964, that's when you had things called the Black Code and the Jim Crow laws, right? Where in a lot of cases they couldn't even own property. They couldn't vote, and they were still struggling to try to get their own individual rights as American citizens. Then in 1965, to the present, the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power Movement. Now, if you look at the whole idea of African Americans in this country as far as freedom is concerned, you can say from 1865 to present they were free. But if you look at it in reality, with Jim Crow, the freedom was really from 1965 to now, right? Media images. Very rarely do African Americans be portrayed without stereotypical images. And a lot of those stereotypical images have been internalized, right? So much so, with that freedom that I just talked about, that small gap of freedom, is a phenomenon called post-traumatic slave syndrome, where a lot of the trauma that happened in slavery is still manifesting itself today. Okay? A lot of the mistrust, a lot of internalized racism is still manifesting itself today. Then we're also going to talk about the internalized racism, which is racism of self-hate. Okay? Then we're going to talk about a phenomenon called racial microaggressions and racial battle fatigue. Okay? Racial microaggressions are... Throughout history, African American women have been portrayed in 4 significant roles in the media. The Jezebel, the Sapphire, the Mammy, and the Matriarch. Right? The Jezebel, she's the woman who used her sexuality as a weapon. Okay? She's usually considered promiscuous. She's usually considered provocative. Okay? The Sapphire, as I look around and see anyone old enough to remember this show called Amos and Andy.
I'm almost 52, so I mean, I can remember.
Y'all gonna raise your hand.
Come on.
Give yourself away. But in the show Amos and Andy, Amos had a wife named Sapphire. And what she was a very emasculating woman. And so it's like what you can see is that character has been played throughout the media as well, to where they'll have a black woman who's very emasculating. Okay? The Mammy, on the other hand, is the caretaker. She's asexual. She cares for not only her children, but the other children. And then, of course, you have the matriarch, the big mama. Okay? Those are the images that's carried on in the media. And what happened is a lot of the black women and black males had internalized these images on what they believe a true black female is. And we're going to talk briefly about how these internalized images influence intimate partner violence. With the African American male, the images that he is portrayed as is a player and a pimp. Everyone in here knows the difference between a player and a pimp, right? If you don't, raise your hand. It's okay. But just in case you're a little nervous, you don't want to be out, tell you the difference between a player and a pimp. Okay? The player is the guy who the women don't know about each other. But the pimp is the guy where the women all know about each other, but they fight for his attention. So in the player situation, all the women think that they're the only one, right? But with the pimp situation, all the women know about each other, but instead of going after the male, they attack the other females and try to do better than one-up the other females. Okay? Then, of course, you got the hustler. Now, hustlers don't have to be necessarily bad. I can see I got a police officer back there. But hustlers don't have to necessarily be bad. You know, he just sells street pharmacology. I mean, he Sometimes you just need the medication without the prescription, right? That's the hustler. But the hustler also, he sells incense, bean pies, bootleg CDs, you know. He got a whole array of goods, right? But he never have a storefront, right? His stuff is portable. Then, of course, you got the intellectual, right? The intellectual usually, you know, they have letters behind their names. You know, they call themselves doctor such and such, you know. Work out at colleges like Fresno State and stuff like that. Walk around talking about they're from Chicago. You know, trying to use big words and stuff. Okay, get over to that intellect. The athlete is the guy who's, well, just like you say, he's an athlete. Usually is a football player, basketball player, real athletic, right? And usually is used just like the Jezebel for his body, right? He's usually not really used for his mind, right? Have y'all ever seen the movie Any Given Sunday with Jamie Foxx? Yeah, he wasn't really the sharpest knife in the drawer, you know, but he was an athlete, right? And then you had an Afrocentric, whereas like the Afrocentric is the person where it's always a conspiracy, okay? And what the conspiracy is that everybody's out to get the black man, right? And every now and then, the only difference between Afrocentric and probably the paranoid schizophrenic is the paranoid schizophrenic actually wears aluminum foil on their head, so the you know, microwave won't get to their brain, right? But that's probably the only real difference. But the Afrocentric is so into their culture that he not only hates white people, he hates black people that don't think like him. Okay?
So then he could be considered a narcissist also.
Very much so.
He or she.
Well, yes, but as far as narcissistic, usually women aren't diagnosed as narcissists. They're usually histrionics. But yes, you're right. You're right. One of the phenomena that's happened in the recent years is hip-hop and masculinity, right? Now, a lot of these brothers have internalized what it means to be a man by listening to the definition of what hip-hop is, right? That you gotta be strong, you gotta have money and materials, you gotta have control, and you gotta be exploiting women, right? So if that's the image of a man, and you're not doing that, then you gotta do the next best thing to get there, right? Now what happens when the female internalizes this? That that's what a black male is supposed to be. And of course, the misogyny of hip-hop is that women are sexual objects. They need to be dominated. They're weak. They're gold diggers. And they're commodities. Gold diggers. Being from Chicago, I gotta say this real quick. I don't want to offend anybody, but I really gotta, call my brother Kanye West out. Being that he's from Chicago too, and I ain't gonna say he started that phenomenon, but yeah.
I said you're just blaming him.
No. I'm just disappointed.
He didn't help it.
He didn't help it, yeah. He really didn't. When it comes to intimate partner violence in the African American community, there are three things that you have to be aware of. The structural, the cultural community, and the situation. Okay? And what's significant about these categories is that they reflect a macro, not and a micro, as far as relative factors on intimate partner violence. Okay? Now let me explain. The structural context I'm there. The structural context is a macro, right? kind of like institutionalized racism, right? Where you're talking about structures, you know what I'm saying, the criminal justice system, educational system, the political systems, and how it affects the intimate partner violence community, and for intimate partner violence in the African American community. It affects the access they have and opportunity they have to different institutions, okay? In America, historically, the employment rate of African American, especially African American males, have been extremely high as far as unemployment. The educational achievement has been extremely low, right? So when you combine those factors, that's why you have a lot of times you have people talking about the pipeline to prison. Okay? The social context of the local communities is a little bit of what we talked about a little bit earlier with the stereotypical images. Okay? You're not only talking about the internalization of those stereotypes, you also talk about how they internalize their definition of manhood, how their definition of femininity get created, things like that, okay? Now, when you have that combination, a lot of African American men especially feel that in order to actually be a man, you have to dominate your female, right? So, as you know, a lot of intimate partner violence is not really about violence, it's about control, right? So if you feel that you have to control your female and she's doing something that you don't agree with, what's the first thing you're going to do, right? I don't encourage you to do this, right? Especially my son back there, is you hit her, and the last thing you want to do is hit a black female, right? Any female. But that's usually what happens, okay? Because they internalize that she is a sexual object, that she needs to be controlled, she needs to be dominated. In order for me to be a man, that's what I need to do, right? Unfortunately, a lot of females internalize that as well, okay? So now you combine that with things like not being able